Welcome to the review of APUSH periods 1 and 2. We are going to have a focus on colonialism for this video. Very important. We have European colonies in the Americas, okay? And we're going to look at the establishment of not only mercantilist societies, but also the growth out of feudalism, capitalism. You have all sorts of growth of society and how the natives at the time suffered from it. So let us begin. We have period 1. Okay, and this period will be from 1491 to 1607, right? Try to move that a bit closer. Now, right off the bat, those people who, maybe there are people previewing this who I guess have come out of US 1. If you're proactive, that is definitely not me. However, 1607, you should know an important event right off the bat, which is Jamestown. Okay, and Jamestown was, of course, an English colony, which we'll get to later. Just keep that in the back of your head for later. It will serve you well, promise. Alright, so where should we begin? So, the first big idea we want to have. Big idea. Alright, we have that native societies. Now, native means Native American. Native societies. They were diverse people, right? Diverse people and cultures, right? And they developed as a resultant of the environments of which they inhabited, okay? This is a big idea you have to know. After recently taking the APUSH exam, I know for a fact you should be able to link this a lot. There are often prompts on colonialism. This is an important idea, okay? Environments of which they, I'll just say, relied upon. All right, so let's start with a couple of the groups. So we have the Pueblos, all right, Pueblo Indians, right? And so they were like farmer economies, you could say, okay? And they were somewhat sophisticated for their time. They had not only beans, they had corn, squash, you know how it goes, maize. Now maize is very important, okay? Let's make a note about maize. Maize led to happenings for such populations, okay? Because it was grown in such abundance, in fact, that the populations of such large organizations and communities were sustained. And so this led to further industrial developments, basic industrial developments, okay? Such as irrigation, which at the time, I can't say was too common. So the Pueblos were, you could say, out of the bat a little bit. All right, and then they had clay, brick, housing. Okay, now these are important things to know about the Pueblos. Now another group which is very important are the Utes. Okay, and the Utes relied on the Great Plains territory, which is now modern day Central America, okay? Central North America, I should say. So they were nomadic in nature. Nomadic in nature. Now what does that mean? Nomadic means that they did not settle in one area for an extended period of time. Okay? they did not settle in one area for an extended period of time, right? So they kept moving, it kept shifting, but they stayed in the Great Plains/Great Basin area. And they were egalitarian. Now that is another important term you have to know, egalitarian. If you use it on your LEQs and SAQs, you don't, it has a very loose interpretation based on the situation. You'll hear it in a lot of places, okay? And egalitarian means all deserving of rights, okay? The ideal that people are all deserving of rights. Okay, and this obviously for Native societies was also, I'd say that's a cultural belief, okay? That falls under the, cultural aspect of domesticity, all right? So now we want to talk about two more things. Now these are more substantial, all right? For here, you should, Great Basin, Great Plains, you should remember nomadic, all right? That's the big part of that, and maize is the big thing of Pueblos, all right? Now we have West Coast, okay? They had permanent settlements. Now, this was a lot different to the nomadic nature of many of the other tribes, and especially with they migrated with the cattle, bison, things like that, right? So you have two tribes, I'd say, called the Chumash, and you have the Chinook, okay? Chumash, I could do pronunciations. Just watch the video back, I guess. I can write it out and then see it if you need. Maybe in the description, who knows? All right, and then we have the Northeast. Right, we have the Northeast. So these guys, such as the Iroquois, they were very important because they were farmers, okay? They were farmers, and they built long houses. And what does this mean? It just means use of timber, okay? And this just shows a sign of sophistication. That's all, instead of the Indian ideal, oh yeah, they just built some tents and all. That's important to know, okay? They had some degree of sophistication, and societies such as the Aztecs and all, and Incas, they dominated these areas, okay? And it's very important to note, they were sophisticated societies. They had irrigation, they had trade, they had everything going on, all right? Far before any European influence lay foot in North America. Now, the point of all of this is that native societies, which I was saying in part up here, drag it down, native societies developed complex communities shaped by the environment in which they settled, right? And that makes perfect sense, right? If you're in the Great Plains, it makes sense. Okay, we have to follow the cattle, right? Because we can't do farming there. It's too dry, so we need to migrate with the cattle that we're following, okay? Or in the north, then you have farming is equitable, right? Or in the south, then they needed irrigation from the Pacific Ocean, stuff like that, right? So it's shaped by the environment in which they settle. It's very important, a key idea you're going to need for the APUSH exam, right? And so they utilize trade networks, okay? Utilize trade networks. What do we have next? And then we have the trade networks, which I'll say like this: North, or even better, North to South America. All right. That is also important to know. North to South America is what the Indians participated in, because they weren't big on the maritime things, and which I'm actually going to get to right now. So there are maritime developments going on in Portugal. Okay, we're gonna start with Portugal of all places, and they weren't very involved at some point, right? But they originated the idea, which led to Spain, right? So we'll get there. Portugal, maritime innovation. Now, what does maritime mean to me, right? So maritime is essentially sea equipment, all right? So this will say sea equipment. By the way, if I look weird on this camera, I am trying to peer through this microphone, which is sort of annoying. Sea equipment, right? So now we have innovations such as the astrolabe, which was navigation. Now this is more US1 content, of course. This is you'll need to know this for US1, but on the APUSH exam you won't need to know specifics, maybe like things that led to European immigration, but I'd really say more the Reconquista movement and all that we're gonna get to. I really wouldn't go for things like Portugal is just not relevant in the broad scheme. Okay, just note that. Okay, so you have the astrolabe, and then you have new boats and strategies. All right, stuff like that. Right, just keep it broad, general. All right. Now there is a lot of change. There's change. Let's section this off. Okay. We have a lot of change going on in Europe at this point in time. Okay, now I'm not going to move too fast purely because I have to write all of this down. However, I'm going to talk a little more than I am writing. All right, so there's change in Europe. Now, what does this encompass, right? So we have a lot in England specifically, but before that, the big idea is political unification, okay? Political unification. Now, what does this mean? This means a lot of things. Now, Europe at the time was mainly religion dominated, okay? So you had Catholicism, you had these like Puritans and everything coming out all at once. And it was a little bit messy. Right? So you have political unification going on. And so this led to a wealthy upper class. Okay, it's the upper class, and you can call these guys aristocrats. All right, that's a safe assumption. And so they longed for foreign goods because they're assholes. Asian goods, right? So they wanted the gold, they wanted the spices, all the good stuff. However, that Europe to Asia trade, what about it? It was blocked. It was blocked by Muslims. All right. So basically, Europe was cut off from said goods. Now, where does this lead us? Let's cut a little bit back here, right? Let's stop getting into the European desires. All right. Let's get back to what political unification means for us. So we have centralized states. Okay, that is a big idea. You have centralized states, and not only centralized states, but you have independent monarchs, which I will get into momentarily. I'll give you a great example. Okay, independent monarchs. Now, I'm going to underline this as best I can. Okay, a little weird, but I will take it. Right, so yeah, we're going good. And now with this independent monarchy, centralized states, we have political unification. We have an economic shift in Europe. All of this. Economic. Now, can you guess what that is? We'll have to see. Shift in Europe. Right? So now, when I say economic shift, a shift in economic structure, okay? There's not a shift in trends. There's a shift in distinct structure, and that is very important. All right. However, the original exploration for the Americas. Sorry I'm starting so much. I'm really fucking tired. All right, exploration for the Americas. Took my APUSH exam today, actually, so all of this is fresh in my head for me to teach. Right, so explanation for the Americas. Exploration. Wow. Lord. Okay. So, with the success of the Reconquista movement, now Reconquista, let's real quick vocab word. All right, Spanish movement. Okay, pushed religious supremacy. Okay, now the Spanish, keep this in mind. Okay, they achieved a lot of success through this. So we were in good economic trends at the time. All right, we were in success. We're balling right now, right? So now what does that mean for little Christopher Columbus? Christopher Columbus, right? So he requests Ferdinand and Isabella. Okay, now Ferdinand and Isabella were the current monarchs of Spain. All right, monarchs of Spain. Okay, and he was like, okay, I want you to fund my venture. Fund my venture. Right? Can you fund my venture to Americas? There is no guarantee I'm going to find anything, but Asia is not a good option for us at this time, right? And we want we want gold, we want silver, we want everything. So why not explore with this new innovation at our fingertips, right? So Ferdinand and Isabella, they were in a good place economically. They were just like, okay, why not? So they do so. 1492, you have the cringy saying, he sails the ocean blue, right? I still remember to this day by that. Oh well, sails the ocean blue. Just remember that, okay? Now, with that, what happens next? So Columbus returns. And claims of gold, silver, riches, spices. Yeah, you have everything, etc. in the Caribbean. Caribbean is where he landed. Okay, that is very important. Specifically, the Bahamas. Okay, so Christopher Columbus lands in the Bahamas. Now, where do we go from the Bahamas, right? So he makes all these promises. He's like, okay, we have a bunch of stuff here. We need to go here. Colonies, right? So this is a turning point. Okay, this is what is known as a turning point. Why is it a turning point? Because it caused an economic shift in Europe. See, there it is. You know I wasn't going to leave it. So economic shift in Europe. From what though? So the current system at the time, feudalism. Now what does this mean? It means peasants, or plebeians, whatever you want to call them. Plebeians is more like Greek, Roman. I'm not going to get into all that. That's my bad. Peasants serve nobles. Wow. Simple idea, right? So, great. However, with this funding that originated, right? Now, with all these promises, there's a shift. There is a shift from feudalism to capitalism. Wow, capitalism. Capitalism is important. Now, this is not first industrial revolution. We will get there. That is far a long time from now. This is not first industrial revolution capitalism, okay? This is not second industrial revolution capitalism. This is early capitalism, all right? So this is under the guise of something called joint stock. Joint stock. Now, what does joint stock mean, right? Joint stock is limited liability. I am going to be a finance major, unfortunately, so I'm going to explain this in finance terms. Joint stock companies were limited liability. All right, limited liability. Now, what does that mean to me? That means they assume zero risk if the venture fails. So the joint stocks were ventures. These are early venture capitalists, okay? So they're funding these journeys, right? And they pool these money, fund the ventures. But if the venture fails, if the people die, the ship capsizes, they don't come back with anything. They assume no liability, okay? They cannot be blamed, all right? They cannot be monetarily, chased down, hunted down for it, all right? So under this, there's private ownership, okay? Private ownership. And then you have free exchange. Free exchange. That is also important, okay? Now, with this economic shift, I'm going to put all the very important things in bigger text, okay? Just for reference, we have the Columbian exchange. Wow, Columbian exchange. That sounds familiar. I would hope it does, okay? You are definitely going to need it. Columbian exchange, all right? So we have a lot of stuff going on here. And it resulted, most of all, in ecological change. Ecological change. All right, and honestly, I have to get back a little bit. I'll get to the treatment of the Indians. That is also very important, okay? Because there was a lot of mistreatment, as I'm sure you know, not only with Columbus, but with the Spanish in general. And there was a lot of religious conversion. We'll get that, okay? So the Columbian exchange. So this was a trade route, right? It's a trade route, and this was essentially, there was a trade between Europe and Americas, okay? And the goods. What do we have for the goods? Oh, goods, I mean, in moral terms, I'm going to say people. I'm going to say food. I'm going to say animals, plants, and the most fun of all, we have disease. Now, disease is specifically one, which is, you guessed it, smallpox. Okay, smallpox, right? Smallpox, native population declined significantly, killed off a lot of them, which I will get to why that is significant later, okay? And now the people involved in this trade were enslaved Africans, okay, through the idea of something called chattel slavery, okay? Now, this is just normal slavery, but it sounds better on the exam, so I am giving you free tips to sound smart. Take them, all right? Chattel slavery. So now for the animals, we have, I'm not going to write it down, but we have turkeys, we have cows, we have horses, all right? And then pigs. And for food, we have tomatoes, potatoes, maize. Maize came from the Americas, and it went to Europe, and it allowed for food stability. In a time of famine and shortage, it allowed for a lot of stability and population growth, okay? That is an important thing you need to know, all right? Maize. I'm going to highlight that 1,000 times, okay? Europe. Okay, maize went from the Americas to Europe. Very important. And then, of course, lastly, you have gold and silver. Okay, gold and silver. Now, what else is important to emphasize? So now we have joint stock, we have capitalism, we have Columbian exchange, all right? And so, what did all of this lead to? Now with joint stock, the Spanish were the first, but others followed. However, the Spanish established a couple things. We'll write Spanish first. right? Spanish established a couple things while they were in the Americas, okay? And that is what was bad for the Indians, all right? We have something that became known as the encomienda system, and you're gonna hear this a lot, encomienda system, right? It said trade I'll rephrase this. There's trouble. There's trouble keeping the Indians under control. Okay. And now when I say this, Indians under control, now I mean two things. Culture, and I mean they died. Now, they died from smallpox. See, there's our little link right there. Columbian Exchange, right? That is pretty significant. Okay, and so the Spanish were like, wow, what the hell, man? Why are you dying on us? And so the Indians obviously couldn't help it. But with the Reconquista movement, the Spanish were spreading very strict Catholicism, okay? And the Indians wanted to preserve their culture naturally, so they resisted. And that led to further death. That led to them Spanish making a point out of Ifu, and it led to more and more and more. And there's a huge population decline, okay? And it's almost extinguished, actually, in the areas that the Spanish dominated. So this is known as the encomienda system, where the Indians were replaced with African slaves, okay? Replaced with African slaves, and there was a reorganized society. This encomienda led to something called the casta system. Now, the casta system will not be something that is specifically mentioned. However, it is useful for something like an LEQ, DBQ, etc., all right? So we have something called the casta. Oh, shit, I already wrote that. Yo, my bad. But reorganized society based on, you guessed it, racial superiority. With the Spanish at the top, then Indians, then Africans. Okay. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all of Unit 1. Congrats. Now, let's move on to Period 2. Fun, right? Alright. This one is pretty simple. Now, after the Spanish. That's how we sum it up. After the Spanish, right? So, the Spanish lay a precedent, okay? But the British did a shit fuck ton more, alright? So you have 1607 to 1754 is our time period. Now, French, we have the Dutch, and we have the British. We have all of them. Right, so what did they do? French, well, I'll be honest, man, not much. They weren't very hostile, all right? They did fish and fur trade. Important for later, keep it in the back of your mind, but not right now, all right? Dutch, New Amsterdam. That's it. Pretty much it. British. Oh, Lord. Okay. Lots of problems. Right? Lots of problems, as we know. And with the enclosure movement in England, England. And I'm going to talk more here because some things you just don't need to write down. It's just, you need to make connections, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here. We lead all the way up to the Enlightenment. Yeah, so we have a lot of stuff to cover in this unit. I'm going to talk a lot, all right? So let's get into it. We have the British. They have lots of problems. Okay, enclosure movement. in England, and that means less farming land. Less farming land. All right, so they have less farming land. Now, what does that mean? That means colonies. All right, colonies. Now, what did I say? Jamestown. 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 1607, right? So that's pretty important. You're gonna need to know that. That's first permanent settlement. First perm settlement. Right. What else do we have? It's joint stock. Been new, bro. Joint stock. And then so that means it's profit seeking. Okay, and that's important because as there grew more colonies, like in the middle colonies and all, and then you had the Pilgrims, they were looking for like not only they weren't particularly joint stock, they weren't looking for profit. They were looking for religious freedom. They were looking for, you know, to build societies away from, you know, the regular British society, even though they participate in Anglicization, which is, you know, it ends up being confusing, but we will get down there. So they suffer. They suffer from what? Disease and native hostility. Now, native hostility. Oh wow, what is that arrow? That's my bad. Okay. Beg Lord William Berkeley for protection. Now, notice how I mentioned that independent monarchs were very important. Now, William Berkeley was an example of what is known as an independent monarch, okay? Keep that in mind. For protection, he refuses. Now, that keep in mind for later. Here, we don't rely on slavery just yet, all right? We rely on indentured servitude. Indentured servitude, all right? And indentured servitude is people sell themselves into labor for 7 to 8 years for free passage to colonies. And what I mean by free is like sponsors pay for them, okay? Okay, now, key date to know, 1612, John Rolfe. All right, John Rolfe. Now this guy was also Pocahontas and all, but we don't really care about that, okay? All you need to know, tobacco. Tobacco. All right, tobacco, cash crop. Definition of a cash crop. All right. Now, what do we want to go over? So they take from natives. Which causes tension. And this is where they ask William Berkeley for help. He refuses. No troops. Right, we have no troops. Oh no, what are we going to do? We now have something called Bacon's Rebellion. Here we go. All right, Bacon's Rebellion. Now, who was Bacon, right? Such a great last name. So we're going to write Nathaniel, which was his first name. Nathaniel Bacon, okay? And so he was an indentured servant. Indentured servant. and he led an uprising of indentured servants. And now, what per se was their purpose, right? So we attacked Indians, right? That was the target. But we also, not only that, attacked Barclays. Why did I put my S out there? Wow, I meant to put an apostrophe up there, but I put the S inside. All right. Berkeley's plantations. Attacked those, and then squashed. Okay, the rebellion was squashed. However, there was, oh shit, yo, my bad. All right, there would. Wow, what is happening? All right. All right. There was an impact, right? Because this scared the wealthy. Scared the wealthy. So now we do indentured servitude, slavery. Indentured servitude to slavery, all right? And this was forgive me, sorry. Chesapeake region. Okay, we have the Chesapeake region. 1620. Pilgrims. Family. Society. Right? Separatists, which were extreme Puritans. All right. Then you have it's not the Pilgrims really. So I'll just say British expanded. It was the southern colonies expanded to Caribbean. All right, expanded to the Caribbean. And here they discovered something called sugarcane. Now, not only did this make rum, alcohol, but also just sugar, right? So that was two very important exports, okay? Those became, the sugarcane was a cash crop as well, okay? So the only thing is, it was labor intensive. What is new, right? So wow, what is our solution? We bring more slaves. More slaves. However, this means more than the white population. And obviously, we can see what this leads to. However, we are not exactly there yet. And laws established calling slaves property. All right. Now, the middle colonies. Now let's section this off right here. All right. Colonies. Diversity. Class. Inequality. You have wealthy, working, and slaves. And then you have things like Pennsylvania. William Penn, he's an important name to know. All right, keep in mind. Quakers were direct correspondents, and they believed in freedom of religion. All right. Now, at the time, the British had a loose hold. Okay, I'm not going to write this down, but the British had a loose hold over their colonies. All right. So we're gonna continue with the Mayflower Compact and House of Burgesses. Now, why are these significant? Self-governing bodies. Self-governing bodies in colonies. Which means they didn't really listen to the parliament or anything else because they were being ignored, right? So they just took advantage of it. And late 17th, we get global trade, baby. Global trade. Now, what do we get out of global trade? Alcohol for slaves. Wow, that is a perfect arrow. It's beautiful. Okay, anyways. Passage, right? Slaves go through the middle passage, which was brutal, horrible. Wow. All right. Sugarcane, right? And then that became alcohol. Wow, big surprise, right? Now this, what was this? Mercantilism. What does that mean? Fixed wealth. It means fixed wealth. Okay? Fixed wealth, which means limited gold and silver. Gold and silver. And that means exports greater than imports equals profits. And to have more of that, we need more colonies. Now, this led to something called the navigation. Wow. Just ignore that, I guess. Navigation Acts. What were the Navigation Acts? Taxes. Goods through British posts led to smuggling and and the British were ignored pretty much. I'll be honest. The colonists really just didn't care, because the British government, Parliament, the King was not very involved at the time, and however, at this time they were more focused on a different issue. We had slave rebellion, which was a new concept. Covert, overt. All right, covert. What does that mean? Covert means, secret, right? So secret means they kept culture, right? That's literally it. Song, dance, names, right? Stuff like that. Overt, break tools. Fake, sickness, stuff like that, crazy things like that. All right? But it worked essentially, right? And so now with overt became increasingly popular, and that led to something called the Stono Rebellion. Okay, and this was essentially slaves burned plantations, killed owners, and squashed by SC, South Carolina militia. Okay, now we have a couple more important things to go. Moving down to the Metacom, or King Philip. Wow. I, I can't even read that, to be honest. Forgive me. But if you want to look on the bright side, you have to take your own notes in accordance to what I am saying, because that is better for you and you will retain the information rather than just watching this video. Okay. Now, Metacom's War or King Philip's War. What do they do? Now, British are destroying Indian life. So they must go. Okay? It's simple as that. That was the native ideal. All right? And so they just attacked. They attacked. I believe, yeah, they attacked New England. Settlement. And they were just bad terms overall. That's all you need to know. Bad terms overall. Alright, very important. Now, we move on to religion. Enlightenment. Now, what does that mean? Because actually, the Enlightenment meant no religion. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Rational thinking. Wow, I'm enlightened for real, making this video at 1 in the morning. Alright, anyways. Sounds pretty rational to me. Alright, rational thinking, right? So it started in Europe. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Right? Now, however, there was very important aspects, which was the concept of natural rights. Born with. Okay? Social contract. This, people give some right to government laws. Oh, please forgive me. Laws in exchange for protection. Right, in exchange for protection. But they reserve the right and duty, actually, I would say duty, to overthrow tyrannical governments. And tyrannical governments are essentially that do not benefit people. Do not benefit or serve interest of people. Right? And all of this meant gov structure, right? Checks and balances. Split power, and that was like judiciary, legislative, stuff like that. Split power, okay? And then you had new lights, religion, old lights, no, and the Great Enlightenment. led by two people, Jonathan Edwards and George Whitfield. And they preached all over North America. All right. And yeah, what did this do? What's the significance of the Enlightenment? Paved thinking for American Revolution. Okay, very important. And just some key things you should know, key terms, whatever you want to call them. Anglicization, which I said earlier. Colonies became like Britain. Okay, they adopted the structure, function. All right, and then there's some disrupt between colonies. All right, I'm not even gonna write that down. But there's also impressment, which starts some irritation among the colonies. Impressment is British draft. Colonist men to Navy. Now that is APUSH Units 1 and 2, 1491 to 1607 and 1607 to 1754. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.